We're behaving just like two people in love.
Uh-oh.
Are you in the mood for love or just some chocolate? Well, join us on this special Valentine's Day episode of Gender Pop to find out. I discussed the 2003 film Down with Love with who else? Author James Wright, of course. This is a fun one, as you'll probably be able to tell with how many times we use the word fun to describe it. Let's dust off that loving cup and jump into the swingin' 60s. Well, welcome to a very special Valentine's holiday edition. And for gender pop, I couldn't just do, you know, a typical rom-com-y type thing. I had to do one that I think deconstructs them a little bit, while maybe possibly also undermining itself. I don't know. But I'm joined with James here to talk about Down with Love. So welcome once more,
Oh,
James.
hello. I it's an interesting one, the Valentine's Day one. Yeah, I was surprised by how much I liked the movie, first of all. But
Hmm.
um I understand that yeah, there are some questionable things at the same time. So yeah, let's
Well,
discuss it.
I'll just say off the bat that I enjoyed this movie too. This is maybe like my third time watching it, so I mean, I guess I've seen it that many times for a reason. It's not because I hate it. So as a movie, I really like it. I actually kind of think it's underrated. But it
Yeah.
does, as with any kind of movie dealing with relationships, it is a bit wonky in its messaging, but it also I think is knowingly wonky with its messaging. So I will just kind of get the formalities of it out of the way and say that Down with Love came out in 2003. It's directed by Peyton Reed, and the um, IMDb synopsis for it says as follows. In 1962, New York City, love blossoms between a Playboy journalist and a feminist advice author, which I think is pretty much sums it up well. What the big part of that IMDb synopsis that it leaves out is that it's an homage to a lot of the 1960s like sex comedies, most notably the ones with like Doris Day and Rock Hudson. Um, so I think it's important to note that because it's like it's intentionally very tongue in cheek with its material. I think it's important to note this isn't a serious movie. Obviously, like we've been saying, it's a comedy, and so I think a lot of the gender stuff it's kind of a lighter touch compared to maybe some of the other films that we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's difficult because it's a whole battle of the sexes thing, while at the
Hmm.
same time kind of trying. Well, okay, we have to get into spoilers at some point because I think
Of
a lot of
course.
the crux of the movie depends on the fact that all the stuff you see at the start with Renée Zellweger is kind of a smokescreen because she's revealed to be by the end playing a whole game where she's trying to get um catch
Yeah.
catch a block to like fall in love with her by standing out. So when you see like at the start we have all the the whole like feminist. Well, because I remember like commenting on this where the idea of what feminism is by like her 3 steps in her book is kind of like reductive, where it's like eat
Yeah.
lots of chocolate, but she's not actually technically a feminist if you go by the character. Well, I mean, she is because she then kind of like stands says that actually I can't do this. I am going to stand up for women. But she wasn't when she wrote the book.
Mm.
If you're thinking about the actual timeline as a timeline, like when she wrote the book, she was technically posing as a feminist. So saying something like "eat lots of chocolate" was her making something up, but then it happened to actually work, and then she's like, "Oh shit, it worked! I That's a responsibility now. I have to keep up this persona, even though I wasn't this thing to begin with." So there's an interesting thing there about like projecting the idea of what being a woman is or what a woman should be, and then having to live up to that if you do project those images. So there's stuff there. It's just maybe
Yeah.
hidden right within the subtext of the subtext, kind of. Yeah.
Well, it's like ridiculous, but it's meant to be ridiculous. And I think a lot of
Mm.
people, again, it's that whole, you know, thing that a lot of people don't really understand satire. Like this is satirizing those Battle of the Sexes movies from the 60s. And like those movies when they were made were very much like of their time. They were caught between like the kind of much more rigid gender roles of like what they had known up until like the 50s and the coming kind of like sexual revolution of like the late 60s and all of that stuff. It was like this weird in between stage where they're still playing within very rigid gender roles, but they're kind of also subverting them or testing the bounds outside of them just because, you know, there was a little more freedom there and a more acceptance for that compared to the decades of movies before that, or at least when the Hays Code came into to play. But with Down with Love, like when you were talking about this kind of like dichotomy between like her working with feminist, making a feminist text, but not really being a feminist from where like what her initial kind of motivation was and all this stuff. And there's repeatedly throughout the film, they always say like, "Oh, I'm not a down with love girl," or "I am a down with love girl." Like it becomes this phrasing, and then that phrasing obviously is taken from it becoming like a new ideology and way people identify, like way women identify themselves throughout the film is like you know, taking everything from this text and making it their personality essentially. And I think that's, you know, every time someone uttered that in the film, it always made me cringe, not like in a bad like writing way or whatever, but just in the way of like you're still pigeonholing yourself into a box, which never usually works out. And it's still like making women think they have to be a certain way and maybe not really affording them the freedom that they think that they're getting from it because it's like they're just supplanting one kind of gender box for another. And it plays into this idea well as well of, I mean, this film very much is still doing that whole like women either have to be like mothers and wives or have to be like the independent career based lady that it's like there's still that kind of idea that they can't mix and you can't be both, but like at the same time there is also, I think we see it a lot nowadays of the danger of thinking that you have to have it all and be it all too because that's like no one can, no one's perfect. And so I don't know, it's tricky either way. It's a bit of a catch 22 either way for women, but um, Down with Love certainly is still playing within that kind of sandbox of you have to either be one or the other, and and we see how the men react to that when they're the shoes on the other foot for them after her book takes off.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's interesting when we have discussions. That's kind of a point. Is like seeing it from like a man's point of view and a woman's point of view, because obviously I naturally am tending towards what the men are going through, just watching
Mhm.
it, you know. And yeah, I find it quite interesting because you do have the idea of masculinity, and I like that it's like the 60s idea of masculinity of like
Mm.
the you know, catch a block, ladies man, man's man, man about
Been about
town,
town.
and it's like it's definitely not the same masculinity we have now. I
Mm.
would say like he's because he's like, I mean, you know, he you see his body quite a lot in the film, and like he's quite lean, you know, he's not like
Mhm,
a
mhm.
big, but you would still say like that is definitely an idea of masculinity. Certainly, like again, as an older person, like you kind of see that, but he has that shifting idea of like, could he ever fall in love as well? And then his boss, Mr. McManus, which again he never acts like his boss, so that's why it's hard to question it. And also, I love the
Mhm.
Mr. McManus name is just
Mr.
such like
Mook.
I'm a man. Um, but his idea
Mm.
of like for masculinity of like he can't really get a date and he wants to be settled down and married, and then you're like, is that it, does he want what women are supposed to want, and what does that mean? There's a part near the end where um was it he says the line, it's just not right. I shouldn't feel used. She should when they've had sex. And it's like that's like, so he has this whole struggle for a whole thing between like being a real man, and that sometimes helps him, but also sometimes works against him. And so it's lots of, as much as it is a dialogue about like ideas of feminism, it's also a dialogue about what it is to be a man, and those things are at play, and they're both at play together. And I do like that the film manages to kind of marry the two quite a lot, as much as it can do in that like, you know, what 90-minute or whatever period of time.
Yeah.
and have a bit of a resolution, but also still work as a romantic comedy because you still want them to actually end up together at some point. They could have done the whole like not ending up together thing, and like that would have been very interesting, but at the same time, but it's a bit. It's not really that type of movie where it's being very, it's
Right.
not trying to do like a. It's it's a very tongue in cheek movie, so it never really needs to give you like a full like strong answer on what they think about the sexes and what anyone should be really. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I expressly wanted to talk about this one for you with you because like the man and women perspectives that we can bring to it, since this movie is like very purposefully about like this is the man side and this is the woman side and how they clash and all that stuff or whatever. But I think you make a good point in that Peter McManus character is he's probably the biggest example of kind of like the crisis of toxic masculinity when you think about it. I mean, like obviously Catcher Block struggles with it, but I think because Peter is so much. I think where Catcher Block didn't realize he maybe wanted these things, Peter's kind of always known, at least at the point that we meet him, that he does want to be settled down. He wants to be a husband. He wants to have that kind of, conventional like family life or whatever. But and certainly being around someone like Catcher, who's like the ultimate bachelor, right? He's this suave, like, almost James Bond-esque like
Hmm.
character. He sees he envies his life and envies what he has, and he probably sees Catcher as like the epitome of what a man is, at least for that time period and stuff, and so thinks that that's what he should be, even though it's like kind of deep down probably quite antithetical to kind of how he really is or the things he really wants. And so, and I wrote down that quote too that you mentioned about like I should be using her, because I think that's just like sums up the kind of attitude of like the whole movie, and that they very purposely are joking around with, where it's like the patriarchal control and what happens when that starts to like feel like it's slipping out of the male characters' hands and stuff, where they're just like, what is happening? Like the other guy's like, women think she has a mind of her own or something. Like, it's like they can't handle when women get a little bit more of the narrative and of the agency in kind of relationship dynamics. Um, but that when you mentioned Peter, that also made me think of the phone call he has at the end with Vicky. Vicky is the editor. Barbara Novak's the main character, played by Renee Zellweger. Vicky plays her best friend, but also the editor at the publishing house, played by Sarah Paulson. And Vicky and Peter end up together, and they have a phone call at the end. That's really sweet, I think. And they both are just like, I'm not going to give up my career. And they're both like, I wouldn't want you to. And so they're both realizing they're like on the same page with it. But I think it's also a nice example of kind of the evolution of relationships, where they're both realizing these things can coexist. They don't have to be at like loggerheads with each other. Like the whole movie up to that point has kind of been telling us and their characters. But
Right.
I think it's in a weird way, I feel like they're almost more evolved than the two main characters are by the end.
Well, it's difficult because I can see the point of them as being more evolved. However, like they're also much more. I don't know if repressed is the right word, but they both don't know, like they're not comfortable with themselves. I mean,
Mm,
Verena's because it is an interesting snapshot of people because I almost think it is too. I don't know if it's ungenerous, but with a catch a block character, he's almost always so self-assured. There's legitimately
mm,
maybe that one bit where he counts to five at the end where he's not.
mm,
That's
mm,
where he counts to three and she's not there because he's expecting her to come running to him by three and goes 4 5 and then has to leave. And he actually looks back at everyone looking at him. And it's like that's like the one moment of insecurity he really has. There's little bits where he goes like, "Oh, am I in love with this girl?" You see it in his face, but he never. It's never that. It's like a second. Whereas that is like
mm.
a fully. Whereas all the other characters, I mean, Renée Zellweger is very self-assured, almost to a crazy degree. So, I mean, you could argue that everything she shows is fake because she knows she's always 10 steps ahead of him. So all of her doubts don't count because it's all in her plan. Everything she does until that point of a reveal is a plan. So you could just like discount her. But in terms of Vicky and Peter, they are constantly because she's like she gets up with like a front of being strong, but you can see she is kind of hurt by like the guy who leaves her at the table and something like that, and she does want to settle down, and he's just like a ball of anxiety, and But they do kind of. They still. I do think they're a sweet couple because yeah, they do work together. But it's a very different model. It is like they contrasted two completely different models of these two like very self-assured people who are. I don't know if you want to call it like the alpha couple and the beta couple or
Oh,
whatever
God.
to use modern parlance. But that's what they kind of do represent. It's like two people that are very self-assured versus two people who aren't, and how
Mm.
both can find love anyway. Although they never even consider the idea of the two mixing. I've noticed this. There's no even little bit between. It's like no, completely separate. I mean, it keeps it simple, but
Yeah. I just
but
think like I think there are maybe more instances of Catcher Block being insecure, maybe not quite to the extent that we see in that moment that you're talking about. But it's like I feel like the whole movie is kind of a humbling of his character, right? Like we meet him at like kind of the top of his game, so to speak. But when she starts to give him the cold shoulder, like when she starts to kind of turn his game around on him, and she kind of gives him the cold shoulder like he does to her early on and all this stuff, he gets he gets angry, he gets kind of like offended, and he kind of has that similar attitude we were just talking about of like, well, I'm the one that's supposed to be treating her that way. She's not supposed to be treating me this way and all that stuff. So it's like I think and especially when, I think it's also important to mention that he also pretends to be someone that he's not for a large extent of the film. When he
hmm,
realizes he has an opportunity to try to pull one over on her. Um, and I think weirdly, it's one of those things where like when you're pretending to be something you're not, you can weirdly kind of be more who you are. I mean, she even says that herself where she's like, I didn't expect that, pretending to be Barbara Novak, I would actually become Barbara Novak. She says at one point to him. So I think it's one of those things where it's like when they both assumed these sort of identities, they did find a sort of freedom, or again, maybe, especially on her end, that kind of self assuredness. And I guess at the end, it's more about them learning how to mix the lessons that they've learned doing this with each other while also hopefully being more truthful with each other going forward. But my biggest gripe with the film is that she's completely motivated by getting because she wants a man's attention.
yeah,
That's
it's
annoying.
it's really. I mean, because I did write that down at one point that like no matter what you want to say in terms of like critiques and satire of the genders and whatnot, there is kind of this universal truth that an attractive, like handsome, charismatic guy will kind of always be the top thing. You just can't like Ewan McGregor. There's just not a. Unfortunately, he'll always be in such demand, like that character is, that you can't really bring him down that much. You can maybe take away a couple of his things he wants, and that's it. And I do think there is a it's hard because I'm not sure that's not even true in society. Like, how do like because as I say, it all boils down to she saw this guy who could get anyone he wanted, and she found a way to get him, and she does that goal. She achieves that goal, but the goal is still being the not prize of a match, but well, he calls her his prize at the end as well. So that is what happens,
I
and it's like
shouted,
that's
"She's
the
not a prize!" when he said
yeah.
that.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because but then like, who doesn't want the Ewan McGregor as that's another. The casting's great because like
Yeah.
obviously Renée
Mhm.
Zellweger has all the ties to Bridget Jones and so on, sort of a romantic comedy thing there, and then Ewan McGregor I think has been a sex symbol since he started out, and like he crosses the
Yeah.
line between like generic sex symbol and alternative sex symbol. Like, there's not really
Mm.
anyone who I've never heard someone go like, nah. I'm not saying he's top of everyone's list, but no one's gone, nah, not your McGregor, mate. Like, do you know what I mean? He's
Well, I
yeah,
mean, I was a big fan. Like, I was all on board the Hugh McGregor train when I was younger. Um, but yeah, I mean, the casting is fantastic. They knocked it out of the park because, like, these two, you know, were at the top of their game at this time in the early 2000s. I
mm,
mean, Ewan McGregor, like, I mean, you mentioned Train Spotting, and he had done Moulin Rouge recently. Renee Zellweger had done probably the first I don't know when first Bridget Jones came out. It might have been a little after
I
this or around this time. She had done
yeah,
Chicago. These were two people who, I think were quite highly sought after, and I think they like just absolutely understood the assignment of what they're going for, and they're also just like at the height of their like charm and like sex appeal and all this stuff, and so they were really bringing it, and it does do a lot of their performances are great. It does a lot of the heavy lifting, and like I also want to say like when we find out that Barbara isn't who she says she's been, and she tells him her whole story. And even though it's annoying that we find out it was all just trying to get his attention, that's like a 3 minute single take monologue that she gives. And there's nothing fancy going on. They just focus on her face and kind of like slowly pull into it. And it's fantastic. I mean, it would be like a great monologue for someone to like do for an audition or something. Like it's a fantastic moment of her performance and all this stuff. So I think that like that softens the blow of maybe the message it's putting forth. But in terms of just like the filmmaking and the acting and stuff, it's awesome. And you needed people that understood the cheekiness and the kind of parody that it was going for it to work. Otherwise, it would have probably been a train wreck. So yeah, Renee and Ewan just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, and it's difficult because can you really blame a character for having a singular goal and achieving that goal? Like, it doesn't technically, it doesn't have to. It's like it's one of those hard things where I think we have this meta narrative of a woman shouldn't go after a man that like lessens her, and therefore you want to say that her character's lesson. But as you say, she gets like this big monologue. She's only strong. She's outwitted him apart from anything else. He's positioned as like the most witty and charming person in the world. So therefore, when you outwit that person, do you not become like better than them? And even if the whole point is to like well, because I think part of it is we are kind of shackled, especially women, by this idea that doing stuff for a man will lesser you. Whereas like there's so many men's movies where the whole point is to get the girl, and you don't say, "Oh, that guy, he's just like a cuck bitch." Like, no, it's like that's the point. He's trying to get that girl. He does it for a whole movie, and then in the end he gets her, and that's a goal achieved. And no one goes like, men can live unshackled with the idea that like I can go and get a woman, and that can be fine, and I'm not going to like question myself about it, and I'm not going to say, "Oh, I'm lowering myself because of this." And so it's almost like by telling yourself that you are stopping yourself from being your full self, because as they do in the movie all the time, they're like, "Well, I don't really want this person." And it's like, but you do though, and if you do, you do, and there's only so much you can stop yourself from wanting that thing. And if you get it, is that not a goal achieved? So,
I mean, kudos to her determination and dedication to the whole bit.
That's our plan, and she executed it
she
very
did.
well.
She stuck with it. I mean, I think in the real world we would call them both freaking psychopaths.
Oh yeah, but that's that's any
but
kind
of course,
of romantic
comedy,
really.
Because there is a question of, is it really a great relationship or even a relationship at all if you have to constantly manipulate each other into it? Because like again, go ahead.
I think in this one case it works because you position him as someone who is very duplicitous and like has not no morals, but like he's an investigative reporter. He's all about like
scoop.
And like digging up dirt on people, and he's quite removed from life in that way, and also he's very confirmed bachelor and all that type of stuff. So if you did see this guy and you wanted to be with him, but you knew he would just use you, like that she does outwit him at like kind of every turn, is it shows two things. It's like, one, she wants to be with this person, but she wants to be with him the way that she wants him to be, so she's going to change him, because that's what she does throughout the movie, is like change him to more of a like wanting to marry her kind of thing. And two, it's like, I know you this well that I can trick you like this. And most people would be like, you tricked me, but he's like, oh no, respect, man, because he's that guy. She knows him well enough to know that he will respect that she tricked him, and he does. So it's kind of like proving they are quite very they're both psychopaths, as you said, but they're sometimes that works, man. Like, as long as you find your partner, I think that's the main message of the movie, because like with the Vicky and Pepita, they're both like anxious wrecks who are workaholics, but they find each other, and it will work as long as they respect each other. And same for here. These are two weird, maniacal trickster psychopaths, but they will work together as long as they respect each other. And that's the main respect, man. That's the main message of the movie. Just respect who you are and respect your partner, and then it's fine.
So, what do you think is the most like frustrating gendered stereotype that this film kind of plays with, or I don't know, attempt to tackle, even though it's not really trying to say anything like deep?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I there's I I like it as a comedy, but I will say I imagine that both genders feel a bit short-served by this film because I don't know. I think honestly, it's like the female characters are in a much lower position, and therefore that's annoying. But I'd also say they're much richer than the male characters
Mm,
because really, I mean, Ewan McGregor character is very much like an archetype, like playboy about town. Um, the Peter McManus character isn't. He's not likable that much as well. It's not like he's like you sort of root for him slightly just because he's not as arrogant as the Ewan McGregor character, but he's also not a very redeemable character himself. And then all the other guys in it are just like I don't know, all the that bit in the beginning with the boardroom with all people with the different initials like TB and BA and
RJ, AG, and CB.
yeah,
Yeah.
great comedy, but also it's just kind of like all these men assholes. I mean, that's a lot of films do that where we just paint every single guy as an asshole. That sucks. And then I would say like you have the women are constantly hitting up against struggles, and therefore that's really annoying. So I think it's just for power dynamics are annoying, and then like it's cool that we do the whole Now magazine thing. I think to a point, like in this weird kind of like it's really weird having mirror like things that actually happened in history with just this complete artificial story that we did as this kind of
Mm.
like hard, like soft biographical movie that isn't a biographical movie. Like this is how this happened. Is it though? Is it? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how. There's a lot of simplifications that happen, but as you said at the start, because it's a parody of these Battle of the Sexes movies, are we just looking at this in the wrong way? And is it even trying to really be a Battle of the Sexes movie, or is it just merely parodying it so it
Yeah.
can deliver what it wants to, which is for quips and the style? Because it's a very stylish movie and it's a very sharp movie. But yeah, I don't know how much it actually cares about the Battle of the Sexes as much as it just that's its framing device. We
Yeah,
wanted to have
yeah.
all these different jokes and stuff because the amount of innuendo the film really comes alive when it's doing its like Carry On esque like the split screen scene between Zellweger
Yes.
and McGregor where they're quite a quirky romantic comedy, not your usual thing. What's it trying to say? So I came into it thinking like, okay, it's going to say some stuff here, and by the end I was like, I don't know if it really is trying to say that much about it. I don't know how much it actually cares as much as it just wants to be a fun and sharp movie, and like in itself, it's still going to be saying stuff about it, but it's a much more substantial Stepford Wives remake again, in my opinion. Same period of time, same kind of aesthetic, more to it,
Ish.
funnier definitely, but
Like a decade
yeah,
behind Stepford Wives, but
is it?
yeah, Stepford Wives
I thought.
70s. This is early 60s.
Oh, sorry, no, I meant when it was made. Sorry, as in this was made in 2003, and that was made in
Oh, oh,
2004.
oh, 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 oh,
I'm
I see what you're
I'm
saying.
all about that early 2000s mindset. See, for an early 2000s mindset film, I think this is great. So I don't know, I give
I
it
think so
points.
too. I think it's a much better offering than what a lot of the movies that were maybe trying to discuss the same things we're doing. I think it is more it is cleverer than a lot of the other ones because I think whereas those movies were maybe would take what this is saying seriously. They're like, no, this
Yeah.
is all bullshit and we're just having fun, which is like that's why I
Mm.
wanted to kind of do this one because I just wanted kind of like a fun Valentine's Day one. But at the same time it is very like obviously gender heavy with the way that it's again because the things that it's parodying even though those movies were comedies, they were still very much they weren't being tongue in cheek about it, obviously. This is just like how
Mm.
they were in a weird way to phrase it, it was a straight comedy. They weren't paying homage to anything. Um,
I
and
mean, maybe it's a little satire there because it's like they're straight comedies and they got like quite famously like gay actors to portray at least for secondary leads.
well,
Like,
it's interesting because when I was doing research for the film, and to be honest, again, it makes sense since we're talking about that it is just kind of a fairly frivolous movie. There was not tons of it, but there were a few interesting pieces written on it, and through that, I found out that apparently it's a very people consider it to be a very queer movie. I don't know if that's
Mm.
because some of the cast is in real life, or maybe because of its kind of campy tone and the way that it's stylized and all this stuff. But I even read in one article that like they'll just blast scenes of this in like gay clubs on the wall and stuff and like play the music from it and everything. And I was like, that's interesting. That's so I just find that very fascinating because it like on one hand it's like very like heterosexually normative with how it's dealing with these rigid gender roles and stuff. But on the other hand, like it is presenting it in a very kind of like over the top flowery kind of ways. Like I can get it, but it's just like I don't know if this would have been like the first film I would have thought of that people would have like queer people would have flocked to. But in a weird way I can get it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a generalization, but I think like the difference between camp and campy is quite thin. Like there is a line. Like if you look at the I mean, I'm using a British reference here, but you know, the Carry On movies, like they're all about like men and women having sex. But you know, there's also a lot of kind of like, and you can almost say it's like very stereotypical, like gay representation in it. But then again, at the time, it was like, you know, who knows how, you know, there was not much of it anyway. You kind of had dance around it. But that stuff's all very like campy, and I suppose that translates to kind of culture of like things like Monty Python as well, and all that stuff. It's tongue in cheek, and it's same as this where it's comedy, but there is a level of, I think it's like anything where by laughing at stuff you're kind of accepting it, and the acceptance still lands in certain places, and therefore I can see why people still kind of venerate it as a gay movie in a way, because it's not it because it doesn't have to talk about that stuff so much. It's not trying to be, you know, like you should, I think a lot of, because a lot of queer movies, a lot of queer cinema deals with like the dour side of it, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
horribleness and the hardships that you do have to face, and that's not very fun, you know. It's not something you want to put in a club. Certainly, is the point. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that they're like bad movies, but they are bad for that type of thing. If you're trying to have a happy time, you don't exactly want something um like My Private Idaho, or I don't know, maybe Midnight
My
Cowboy.
private, yeah, that's true. That I mean, that is a good point. That a lot of queer cinema is still very much focused on the kind of like tragic, bigoted aspects of it, which are very important to tell. But it is always
Mm,
very fun to get to see just like queer joy and everything. And I think that's a good enough point that sometimes you kind of have to find it in more unlikely spaces sometimes. Um, and it's also just like yeah, I think there's just something so kind of kitschy and again, I keep saying it, but like unserious and you know, semi like glamorous about these kinds of movies and the way that they present themselves that I can see why um they certainly would be a more interesting draw for queer people than the kind of more milk toast hetero films that we often get. Um but I think it's also
I
it's interesting because the movies that it's pulling from also have like queer history with them because
mm,
like I've already mentioned one of the bigger stars of these kind of movies back in the day was Rock Hudson, who was a closeted gay man, and unfortunately he would end up dying of AIDS, but he was closeted for most of his career. The actress that he did most of these films with, Doris Day, they actually became really, really good friends. And she had like a talk show like in the 80s, and that's he ended up actually coming out on her show. And so it's kind of just like it's interesting that kind of behind the scenes of these films, there is that undercurrent of queer identity kind of poking through or kind of still being a part of it. And like obviously in that end of the spectrum it's a sadder version of it. But you have this the down with love spectrum of it where, you know, I think it just adds to the kind of colorful character of the overall film. I think it's interesting that a lot of these types of movies kind of end up being morality plays in a weird way. And I know that you kind of had mentioned that when you were watching it, how there ends up being this kind of spectrum of like all the morality or none at all.
Oh yeah. So like just for well that was more about the hypocrisy of the male characters, which going back to what you're saying about like one of the bad stereotypes, like yeah, I mean, but I do see people like this in real life, so I don't think it is a terrible stereotype. But like, the men who there's that bit where the guy's complaining about the woman he's seeing, you know, having her own opinions and her own mind and how he doesn't like it. And they're like, oh, I'm having trouble with my wife. He goes, that's not my wife, it's my mistress. And it's just that idea of like, okay, so you're just annoyed that she has her own mind, but like, well, you could just not have a mistress, you know that, right? Like that's my kind of where I come from with it, where it's like, I think I said to you, like either be immoral or don't have moral outrage at things. And I know it's a very simplistic way to look at things, but I do kind of believe it, where it's like, if you're doing all these terrible things, why are you so angry about someone else doing terrible things? Like, doesn't that just make sense to you? Because you're doing those things. Why it? So yes, it does go back to a sexist thing, because it's like, if you're a man in business, because I'm not like this, so I don't really understand it. But like, if you're a man in business who wants power and wants control, why would you begrudge a woman from one of the same? Like, just because she's a different gender than you, she's still a person, and you feel like this. So why are you so outraged by someone else feeling like that? It doesn't really make any sense, especially if you're okay with other guys having it. Although I do believe that most men in power don't like the other men that are in power with them. They want to see them fall as well. So personally, I just feel like you have to put up with them. Whereas women, you can kind of try and marginalize. Like, so therefore they do try and do that. But if they could, they'd marginalize every motherfucker around them. That's kind of how I feel about men in power. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm just taking this from a guy who's never seen stuff like that. But yeah, it's very it's very easy for a movie like this to make fun of those people, despite the fact that, to be fair, it's people who have that kind of position that probably finance this movie anyway. It's a very weird thing, Hollywood. We're going to a general point now about Hollywood and how most Hollywood films kind of make fun of rich people and like, power hungry people and produce and stuff. But it's like, well, they are the people who make these movies. So technically, what are we saying here when a lot of times they're why the movie's been made in the first place? Are they like I always find when I watch a movie, I question any kind of morality in it, because that at some point you've probably taken money from these people and they've done terrible things.
Well, it's also like, who is it making the morality about? And a lot of times in these
Hmm.
kind of movies, it ends up siding against the women, right? Where it's like, I have a quote from an article that I read about it's more about the 1960s sex comedies, but I think it ties in nicely to the kind of morality conversation, where it says the message is clear. A career might be a fun experience for a young woman to indulge in, but it's really just a stopgap on her way to her real purpose as a wife and mother. And if she had to be duped to find love, well, she kind of had it coming, right? So it's like, I think that kind of ties into that. These A lot of these films, at least in the past, have kind of they kind of frame the female storyline as like this fantasy and stuff. Like, oh, isn't it fun to let them kind of live in that world for a little bit? But it's not the real world. And when they come down from it, they'll just be back like in the kitchen trying to feed their 10 children or whatever. Like, and it's just
Hmm.
like it is this kind of like, it is saying something morally at the end of the day of like, you know, women can't actually like fully embody this kind of like uh powerful positions that men often take. And I think it's also telling that in Down with Love, Barbara Novak, whose actual name is Nancy Brown, starts as Catcher's secretary, which is like, especially for the 60s, has this kind of connotation of being these like submissive, often like sexualized roles that a lot of men would take as mistresses and stuff. And like, obviously, the point is that he didn't take her as a mistress. She wanted that, but it's like she already did start from her initial relationship with this man started from a huge kind of power dynamic where he was like that big dog on top and she was like on the lowest rung of that company and all this stuff. And like, obviously she wanted to kind of get on his level and like become his equal. But it's also like, um you shouldn't have to like prove your equality to someone. It should just be a natural uh thing. I mean, obviously this gets into a lot of other crap we deal with in real life. But yeah, I don't know. I think that will always still be my biggest bone to pick with this movie, even though I know it's being silly and all of this stuff, is that she upended her entire life because of this guy. Which like a lot of people have done in real life. Sure. I mean, maybe not obviously to her crazy extent, but I don't know. I still end up feeling kind of bad for her at the end because of that, I think.
I don't again. I do think that might be to do with the preconceived notion that doing anything for a man is a problem. Like
Yeah.
I remember when the movie started, I was saying like, "Oh, look, it passes the Bechdel test straight away because it's three women talking to each other about their success, like her success." So nothing to do
Mm.
with a guy.
Hmm.
Even
Hmm.
though if you retroactively, technically, it's all for a guy, so technically it doesn't. But yeah, blah, blah, blah. But like she did proactively, she was in a spot, as you say, she was his secretary in a very low position, with low pay and whatnot. And she upended it to the point where, in the end of the movie, he's applying to be her secretary with much lower pay just so he could be around her. And is that not power? She's running this
It's true.
magazine at this point. She has billboards. She's outselling his magazine. What more can she do to get power over him? And yet it still seems like it's not good because it's because it's for a man. But it's like, but
Yeah.
she runs this like she does. The results are there. It's just that preconceived notion of like, oh man, like why does it have to be for a guy at all? Like, I mean, because you could take that out of it, right? You could do a separate movie where, oh no, I've just been tricking you all along, and now I run this company. You. She could have just not. Yeah, she could have not appeared. There's probably an alternative cut where she doesn't appear in the elevator at the end after 5 seconds and does a whole redhead thing, and then yeah, that just doesn't in the movie. Everything just walks away and he dies. Which why not? Because and then the atom bombs go off at the end.
Um,
Because okay, that's one thing
yeah.
I am annoyed by, that they dropped all that stuff. They kind of like mentioned it at the start, kind of like nuclear. I was like, oh, they're gonna do some like kind of weird like nuclear war, Cold War thing, and then nope, just completely disappears from the movie straight away. So yeah, fair enough.
I mean, it reminds me of kind of the conversation I had in the Legally Blonde episode where it's like her initial motivations aren't great because again, it's about like kind of upending your whole life for this man that's already rejected you and like all this stuff, and has been really disrespectful and shitty to you. But in the end, it actually becomes more about this self-actualization journey, and she's actually a better and more evolved human being because of having gone on this. And it's kind of like, well,
Mm.
does the kind of initial starting point matter at that point if it's like if it actually changed at one point from like being about this other person to actually being about uh understanding yourself better and coming into your own power and confidence more and stuff, in which I think we definitely see with Barbara, because again, you come to that line where she's like, I actually became her. Like I think she actually does believe in after this time the stuff that she was. I mean, she kind of goes back and forth on that, right? Where she's like, I believe it, I
Mm.
don't believe it. But again, it's because they're still trying to straddle that whole like a woman has to be either or thing. It's like, well, in a perfect world, she can be both. She can be the strong feminist and advocate for women's rights and all this stuff, and still be in love and be married. Like, it's um and kind of hopefully that's I mean, I don't know. It's like, do you think by the end of it she continues kind of being Barbara, or do you think she kind of reverts back to being more Nancy now that they've gotten together?
Well, I mean, all you can go by is the musical bit at the end of the movie in the credits as like a little coda, so like literally a coda, where they have it's an equal duet. So you could say that
Mm.
if that's their relationship, then yeah, there is an equality there. I think the movie is trying to say that if you have it is very difficult to have it all, and the only way you can even think about doing it is by having a partner who meets you at an equal level. I think that is if there's a message, it's that, like how Vicky and Peter are the same type of person, and how like Katja and her are the same type of person. And I think it's saying, yeah, that's the only way you can do it, because you either want, what, because during the movie, because of the book, they do show a lot of women reversing for roles with the husband, and I think in certain ways it doesn't work because it's like they show. I can't remember, it's in the counter and they make a guy like go to the other side of the shop and he can't do it because he's not used to it. And like I think there's this idea of like if you have these two very defined roles and you try to just invert them, that's not going to work because you're giving people things they don't have the skills to do the things and just like, okay, just do this now, and it doesn't work either way. So you have to have two people of a similar mindset and both sharing responsibilities, and that can work maybe. Or you have two people who are covering one side and the other side, and you have to be okay with that. And like, obviously, it shouldn't have to be women doing one or the other, but at the time, that's just how it was seen, and blah blah blah.
I think
I
also
think
be
yeah,
willing to like it's an exercise in empathy, right? Be willing to understand what it is like on the other side of it. Like
yeah,
you were kind of saying, she was his secretary, and then by the end, he's applying to be her assistant. I mean, obviously, it's not because he wants the job for real. He just wanted to see her, but another
you got to
manipulation
take
tactic.
yeah.
But it
Well,
is like,
you
again, they both have kind of experienced what it's like to be under the thumb of the other. And like this is a common kind of dynamic that we like in movies where people like mind fuck each other so much that they fall in love with each other, which is like, again, it's a fun thing to watch in a movie. In real life it would be like absolutely horrific. But I guess through their scheming with each other, it's a weird kind of, I mean, hopefully it's not a real takeaway anyone has from it, but it's like through their scheming, they somehow found a quality because they both have stuck it to each other enough to have experienced the other end of that.
well, yeah, I do think there is a. I mean, maybe again, I'm reading a bit too much into it, but I do think there is a certain level of equality present because, yeah, at the start, I mean, if we go chronologically here,
Hmm.
she is his secretary, and most like 9 times out of 10, because they make a point at the beginning of the actual movie of saying he goes through secretaries like 3 a week, right? So most for painting this picture that most women become his secretary. Something happens because it's not like he bangs the secretary. She just like can't even take that he's got two penises, right? So it's just like his general oeuvre is too much of them. That's what they're trying to say. Whereas she was like, I refuse to accept this. I'm going to do I'm going to reject the position I'm in, and I'm going to do this whole elaborate thing and get what I actually want, which is to be your wife. It's an idea that she had a goal in mind, and she rejected the normal standards of society to find a different way. Whereas the catcher character has everything going for him, standard society as it is. Like when he says to her, towards the 2/3 part of the movie, where he's like, "Oh, we can set everything right now because you can just say like I didn't mean it about this book, and like we can like put everything back to where it is." And she's like, "No, I'm not." So she rejects that as well. So she's not following the status quo because she does say, "Nah," and then she sets up her own whole status quo with the Now Company. And then by the end, he's willing to like what you would call give up, lower himself, give up his status to be around her. And maybe it was like a false thing. Maybe he was just lying to see her, or maybe he wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks if he was in that position. But taking it on good faith, if that's what character was willing to do, he was very willing to assume the role she wasn't willing to assume at the very start of the
Mm,
secretarial
mm.
role. So if you're being generous, there's an idea that like when you meet someone as an equal, someone you should be, as you said, with understanding and empathy, you should be willing to like go through what they go through. Um, and maybe that's what it's saying. Like it's not so much, Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because it's like, should men be at home instead of women? And it's like, well, maybe not, but maybe at least understand that both are hard. Because I think that's the thing that I think there is a subtext to this movie of the idea of men in the boardroom of companies who at the time didn't want women in there because they would then find out um, it's not as hard as it looks. And that's me reading a lot into it. But it's like, because I just put myself in the role of like a 60s wife and a husband where like, he buggers off to work all day. She's at home, like, taking care of everything. And he gets home, he's like, oh, I've had such a hard day at work, man. And all you've done is sit around. So he's not, understanding what she's gone through for a whole day. Cause like, obviously being a housewife is fucking hard. Like, I think we all know that if you've had any experience of like, home making a tool, it's fucking difficult. And being in the office, well, there are definitely. I'm like, I have a full time job and like it is stressful, but also there's a lot of pissing about, right? There just is, and there's also fun things to be had, and like maybe you have friends there, and there's always different like benefits to it. Going by the very stereotypical idea, you're a guy who's in a boardroom full of guys joking around, and then your wife's at home on her own with the kid. Like there's always stuff where if you try and paint it as like, oh, I've done so much work, so you have to cook and clean for me. That's so little empathy showing up time that all we could do is like maybe understand that both people had a hard day, or even like not as so. Yeah, sorry, but that's why I think that probably a lot of guys at that time were so afraid of women being in the workforce. Not because oh my position's because they say oh she's going to take my job, but no, it's because you know that if she comes in, she's going to see that your job isn't as hard as you make it out
This
to
is
be.
what you've been
So
doing all day.
yeah, exactly. So when you come home and say, like, "Oh, I need you to make me dinner because it's been so hard," you're like, "No, it hasn't. I know what you did. You did nothing." You go back to like American Psycho and like the lives they live, where they're just like literally not even working and they're just doing. It's like that is a lot of corporate jobs. You're not actually fucking doing fuck all. Why would you expect someone to cook and clean for you when you get home? It doesn't make any sense. And so yeah, I don't know. I just think that's like an unspoken thing of that whole resistance to women in the workplace. It's like an idea that like oh no you're not allowed to know my world kind of thing, which obviously we're way past now, but if we're bringing
Mm.
in that kind of like battle of the sexes movies episode, I know but but women know what it's like to have a job is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there aren't equality things. What I'm saying is there are women in the workplace. But I'm talking about a time when like you could have a whole company where there's no women at all. They don't even know, pretend it's really hard all day. But yeah, because if we're basing it off those Battle of the Sexes comedies from the 60s, that's where they're coming from. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought, but there was a whole thing there about
No, I mean, I think
duplicity.
it's I don't know. I enjoyed talking about this movie because it's like on one hand it is just like really fun, but on the other it is a nice little lens into once again how patriarchy harms us all and makes us have to go through elaborate fucking shit just to have like the bare minimum of like equality and respect and like I don't know, but it is it's always I mean that's kind of the power of comedy where they can have that sort of montage that you were referring to of seeing like, oh, what happens when the tables are turned and the men have to do the traditionally women's work and all this stuff and women get like a modicum of power in the situation and it's just like, in an Oscar baity type of movie that would probably be like, really really intense and dramatic and all this stuff, but it's able to make its point quickly and succinctly when it's packaged up in this kind of like candy colored romp that this movie is. And I think it's really important to be able to have movies like this where, on the surface you can just enjoy it as just like a silly little kind of period piece parody. Say that three times fast. But, there are some societal underpinnings going on beneath it if you want to take a look. Pop the hood and take a look.
Yeah, I think one thing that not that I still enjoyed the movie overall, but I think as it went on, I was less enamored with it because of the fact that it starts off kind of trying to outside of the gender issues, it kind of like tries to bring up all these things about as I said, the atomic bombs and also technology and so on. And then it kind of abandons those things. I feel like in the middle when they did the whole like in Catcher's apartment where Peter's trying to like mess with all the stuff and it's all just different switches and they don't work. Like there's some commentary there about like man and technology, but they don't really do anything with it. They're just like, yeah, his apartment's just full. Because I thought they were going to do some kind of thing where because he switches apartments with him, that like the rustic apartment was more important, and then it just kind of got dropped. It was just more of a level of like farce and confusion, which is the theme. But you know, I think there was a lot more to play with there that they just didn't touch upon. And I think that's just because I've been watching Fallout, and that's all about that type of stuff. And I'm like, where is this stuff in Fallout? Like,
I mean, I think there's something to be said for that too, where it's like, you know, I think audiences are so trained to, I don't know. It's weird because we live in a time where it's like critical thinking is very much disappearing, but at the same time, fandom is like so rabid that like we're more trained to look for things than we have before, just because
mm.
we have the
Well,
ability to rewatch it and be on message boards all the time and like kind of constantly engage with the content. Whereas before, obviously, we didn't have that. We kind of just maybe saw it once and had to draw what we could from it and be on our way and stuff. So it's like, you know, it's nice to be able to just engage with something that's, you know, a little less intense and a little less full of itself. I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think any kind of like satire romantic comedy is both hard to pull off, but always normally fun. Like I think I was going to possibly suggest they came together at some point as well, but I don't know how much that even cares about gender as much as it's just like satirizing for romantic comedy.
yeah.
So it's a good movie, obviously, and there's a few moments like that. But so yeah, there was a point where I don't know if he was like onto her or if it's saying something about the gender roles because there was a bit where he said she didn't sound like a blonde on the phone, and obviously she's not a blonde like from her like original self, she was a brunette. So there's like a little bit of like, does he sense who she really is when he's talking to her on the phone? But then he also calls her like a spinster librarian feminist as well, which is a great like terrible. Well, there's also a thing where she literally says in her plan, "Oh, I knew that you would find out what I looked like when the book got famous," which is very silly. That she's like, "I know that this book will get famous, and I like I don't care about that. I care about you seeing a picture of me, so that you then know that I'm hot." And I mean, that's self confidence. Like you cannot fault this woman for self confidence. She knows she's going to write a bestseller. She knows that if you look at her, you're going to know she's damn hot. Do you know what I mean? Like she's there. She's not got any insecurities at all. This woman, which is there's an empowerment there to a point. Like even if she was technically a spinster librarian, I suppose, but not really.
I'd be
That's a
happy
weird
to be
one
a
there.
spinster librarian. That sounds hot to me.
Well, I was going to say as a librarian, I find it very offensive that whole characterization. How dare you? Um, but yeah, and there was another thing but it doesn't really matter because it was a character she was playing. But while I was watching it, I was wondering like why she liked when the Ewan McGregor is protected. Because we didn't talk about the Zip. What's his
Zip
second
Martin.
name? Zip Martin, the like astronaut he plays for like, quite I say quite a significant period of film. Like he's just like a star, a moonstruck kind of like hick, but also an astronaut, which is such a see that is an interesting gender role discussion of like she's playing a role, so who knows how she actually likes him, but she acts like she thinks he's great at least in this role. And I was like, oh, he's a dumbass. Why does she like that the whole time? Because the actual character of Catcher is, again, I said it before, he's kind of actually is quite cool. He's a womanizer, which is a shame, but he's still quite cool. Whereas this Zip person is not cool at all, and it's like, would you prefer this person to be that simple? Um, but yeah, you can kind of wave that away and say, oh, she knew he was just playing a role, so it's fine. But there
He's
is
an
a kind of
astronaut. You can't be that dumb to be an astronaut. It takes
well,
a lot of
that's what
training
I
to be
said.
an astronaut.
I think that's my whole point is if you take it as like just that character as a female object of desire.
Hmm.
There's the whole narrative like what a woman has to be like confident but also submissive and blah blah, but which is fair. But also as a man, it's like you want to you do women want a guy to be like accomplished like an astronaut, but also kind of a dumb simple hick guy who you can boss around because that
Like
that does come across
intellectually
sometimes in
lesser
like
than you.
yeah, exactly. Like he's not intimidating. He's very charming, but
Hmm.
he's also like an astronaut, so he's not like a bum. And it's like that's basically impossible as well. That's also a gender divide you can't really straddle as a real man. And I'm sure it's possible. That's why like you know football players are desirable or something because maybe you're a bit simple, but you're also really accomplished. I don't
Well,
know. That's a generalization as well, but
I think it's more telling that that's who he picks to be to woo her, knowing that
sure,
that is maybe more her speed, or that that's more of a kind of way of being as a man that it's maybe more. It's sort of he's sort of telling on himself, and then he's like, oh, they want this kind of like softer, all shucks, more
maybe.
sensitive kind
Although
of guy.
I get that, although I think the reason he picks that is because she at that point can't get anyone to in her own narrative can't get anyone to bang her because they all know who she is. So she needed someone who was like in because he says I've been in an orbit for. She literally says I need someone who's been out off the planet for the last 2 weeks or whatever, and he's like, oh, I've been off. He does that. He brings her the one guy who wouldn't
Literally.
know who she is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is partly to like if there is stuff that's very subtext because this is literally what she needs to have. What again? The only problem with the film is it does undercut these points because it's the point you could make it's like a feminist point to say when a woman finds success, no one wants to have sex with her because that's what she's facing. However, because of the big reveal, we know that was part of her plan. So is it really what was going on at the time, or was she just faking that? So yeah, it undercuts its own gender discussion by saying that it was all a farce because
Well,
everything that
especially
happened up
because she
until
knew
that
who
point,
he was, right? So she knew that
yeah,
he was all a put on. So like, she was just playing him that whole time of like, you really don't know who I am, and this is exactly who I'm looking for. Like, she was just testing him to kind of see how far he was gonna take things. And I mean, obviously, like things changed when they realized they had like genuine feelings for each other or whatever. But um, it's difficult to parse through when you have just like multiple layers of them like lying and uh to
yeah.
each other and
I can
being. I
definitely,
mean,
well, I can definitely see your point when you said like that there is a level of wanting stuff for a man undercutting stuff only insofar as, at least when she says in her big monologue, she says like, I knew that if we did this we'd have to go on lots of fancy dates, and that's a very big stereotype for women of just like, oh, you just like going to the theater and stuff. So there's definitely a level there where it undercuts her actual aims of like any like power or social advancement. She just wants to be taken on lots of fancy dates, as by her words. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. It is a bit of fun, but yeah, it's
don't
it,
take
it
any
should
of it
be
at
considered
face
maybe
value.
yeah. It maybe shouldn't be seen as a serious feminist text or anything, yeah.
No,
But it's
it's
fun.
just it's sometimes you got to make light of these things. It's like, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. We have, especially on the show, you can get so bogged down in the kind of grim realities of what it is to live in these kind of dynamics and stuff, but it's nice to kind of just be able to poke fun at it and be like, "See, isn't this really silly at the end of the day?" you know.
I think I said to you as well when we watched it last night, like it's very hard to take any of this stuff truly seriously as a critique of anything, considering even on their best day, a lot of these films are the prettiest of people and the richest
Yeah.
of people trying to
Yeah.
romance each other. So it's like, meh, can you really make a real comment on like male and female gender roles when we are talking about like near the 1% of people? It's not really about anyone, your average person anyway. So it's hard to make that. Where it's a romantic comedy with just completely normal people that isn't like some weird sideshow on Channel 4, like the Undateables or whatever.
Yeah, whether it's reality TV or these two going at it in this movie, sometimes we do just like to watch pretty people do dumb shit. Well, on that note, are you down with love or up with love, James?
I think it has to be overall as a movie and up with love, even though
Yeah,
there are certain parts that you would question. But as a movie, it's a fun little movie. Yeah,
I
I think
agree.
it's definitely a good Valentine's Day movie. I suppose I'd say
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I think it offers
If you want
something
a
a little different.
non-traditional,
Yeah.
not hearts and roses, but still with the spirit of like relationships, then yeah, I'd say it's an up with love thing.
Well, there you go. It's not as critical of an episode that I was maybe thinking it might have been. I know it's like I had such a different concept of what this movie was when I was younger and first saw it, I think. And I kind of just see it from with different eyes and different perspective now that I'm older and everything. And yeah, it's just a fun thing to sit back with and enjoy and you know, maybe it provides something a little more refreshing for your Valentine's Day, whether you're with someone or not. Be
Wait,
your own
what
Zip
did you see it as
Martin.
before? Yeah.
No, I think I probably just took it, yeah, more at face value, more seriously and stuff. Like obviously I got that it was like a comedy and it was highly stylized, but I don't think I necessarily knew what it was like pulling from, and I think I thought it was more definitively saying things about gender and men and women and everything. And now I think I can kind of just sit back and enjoy it a little more and find
Uh, so
find go ahead.
you were down with love then before.
Um, I've always liked this movie in terms of Down
Okay,
with Love
because
as a
yeah,
movie. I liked it. But I thought that I was watching something that was like more cleverly subverting things in a more like serious way than realizing that they're just trying to more subvert the thing that they're paying homage to, and that this movie isn't really trying to have some like grand deep message, you know. So I think I just like I lightened up a little bit as I gotten older with some stuff and everything. So that's nice. And I appreciate having, as someone that's like never been super into Valentine's Day and have often been alone for it. I think it's more enjoyable to have something that, yeah, like we were saying, is a little more different and has something else to offer rather than kind of your more strict, straightforward sort of rom-com or Hallmark movie. So this is the kind of thing that I can kind of put on and it maybe won't make me feel like shit. So I appreciate it for that.
It's always good. Always good to have movies that don't make you feel like shit. Yeah.
Yes, that's if you can take one thing away from this episode, it is good to have movies that make you. Although, if it makes you feel like shit in the right way, where it's like maybe you're questioning some of your thoughts and stuff, and that's good. That has value too. But this is not what we're here for today.
No, nothing will be questioned.
Well, thank you again for joining me. I hope it was a fun, campy ride that we took for this episode, just in the same kind of vein that this movie is in. And maybe I'll start projecting it on my walls too and just pretend I'm in a gay club.
It's a very fun movie. I think for dialogue, apart from anything else, it's worth a watch
Yep.
for, because especially if you're a fan of pun and innuendo. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
obviously that's within the campy thing, but just to drive that point home, there are so many puns, so many innuendos in this movie. It doesn't really relent with them, and they're all
Yep.
pretty good. Sometimes you're just like very surprised by how good they are. So I definitely give it a recommend as a movie.
Yep. Yep. It's just a good time. So if you need a break from other things, sometimes I'm like, I've watched too many like, dark, messed up things. I need kind of a break and a reprieve. This is a good one for that, I think. So very much up with love on this one. And I hope everyone else enjoyed us gabbing on about it. And that maybe we can all get together and get some tang after. So, how about you, listener? Are you down or up with love? Did this make you want to be a ladies' man, a man's man, or just a man about town? Either way, I hope you had a real groovy time listening to this episode. James's work and socials are in the show notes so you can get across all the cool things he does. Give me and the pod a follow on Threads, and of course, if Cupid's arrow shoots just right, you'll be hitting that subscribe button. That does it for Gender Pop this time, but I hope love finds you today and every day, whether it's from someone else or from within yourself. And, when in doubt, just reach for that chocolate bar. Thanks for listening.